Hey fellow Trek fans, I'm Pit Trekkie and welcome to another episode of Pittsburgh's Trek Chat. Well, for today's episode, I'm going to be reviewing episode 5 of the second season of Star Trek Picard called Fly Me to the Moon. So this was an interesting episode in the fact that it wrapped up a small story arc, added some basic details to the story, moved the story forward, but also added a big chunk into the story, which is going to move us to the end of the season. So basically, the episode started with the young blonde that we saw in the previous episode in a flight simulator. She is supposed to be going on the Europa mission within the next 3 days. So unfortunately, she fails in the simulator and dies, and this seems to rattle her and makes her wonder if she should be going on this mission. Skip to Picard. He and the lady who looked like Laris apparently transport into her apartment. She says that she's not Laris, but that she's a supervisor with the name of Talon, and that she has been assigned to protect this young woman for the past 24 years, and that she has never met her, which is a part of her supervisor role that she calls herself. Picard is able to deduce that this supervisor role is very similar, or the exact same thing as when Captain Kirk met Gary Seven in the second season finale of Star Trek the Original Series called Assignment Earth. And so he's starting to figure out that this character is pivotal to the changes in the timeline. And when he tells Talon his name, she recognizes the name Picard and tells him that Rene Picard is actually his ancestor who she is protecting at this point. So we find out that Talon has been protecting her and has been monitoring her for 24 years. And that she actually talks about how intelligent Renee is, that she was basically a prodigy at many different things in her young life, but that her mental health, her depression and anxiety basically kept her from moving forward. Talon shows Picard a visual of the psychological evaluation that she was ordered to receive as part of the Europa mission before she would actually be approved to go. And Picard notices that the therapist is trying to tell her that her fear can be a companion and that she should listen to her fear. And he asks to see who the therapist is, and it turns out it's Q, and he realizes that Q is trying to talk her out of the mission. So Talon talks about, well, if this Q is all powerful, then why doesn't he just snap his fingers and have Renee disappear, or have the ship she's going to be on disappear? Picard says he doesn't know why this is happening, that he suspects that there's something wrong with Q, which we have seen throughout the whole season up to this point, that something seems off with him. And he talks to her about how they need to protect her and make sure that she goes on the Europa mission to Io in 3 days. And so basically what she said is that she is supposed to be going into a quarantine within 15 hours before she goes on the mission. And Picard says that we need to protect her at that point. But Talon says that there's a gala that she is required to go to later that evening before she goes into that quarantine. Now I'm going to put a pause on the story right there. Now we're going to move backward a little bit, and we're going to talk a little bit about Rios, Raffi, and 7 and 9. That whole ICE story needed to be wrapped up. So Rios is on board the ICE bus heading toward a sanctuary district by the U.S.-Mexico border. Raffi and 7 are waiting for the bus to show. Raffi wants to basically attack and raid the bus because she's angry and upset about what happened with Elnor. 7 and 9 also knows that she's upset about her relationship with her son Gabe. And 7 and 9 tells her, you're trying to find a target, you're trying to dig your heels in, you want to fight. Well, Raffi counteracts that and says that 7 and 9 is playing things too easy, and that she's too easy on wanting to protect the timeline at the expense of Rios. 7 and 9 stays calm and is basically able to reason with Raffi by saying, come on, give me the tricorder. Raffi ends up giving it to her. They send out an electromagnetic pulse that shuts the bus down. Rios on the bus knows what's going on, and he tells the other prisoners to be prepared, while the ICE officer is telling all of them to shut up. So after the bus stops, the security guard goes in to tell Rios to shut up. Rios attacks him. The rest of the people, I think the other gentleman, Pedro, attacks, and the other people get ready to get off of the bus. 7 and 9 and Raffi come on board. They stun the bus driver with the tricorder. They let the other people loose, and that pretty much wraps up that story right there for them. Then what we do in the storyline is we find out the Borg Queen is very much alone after Dr. Jurati tricked her and abandoned her in a previous episode. And so the Queen is actually able to start tapping into cellular communications in the 21st century, and she enjoys the voices from the different cellular communications. She ends up being able to tap into the computer to tap into local cellular towers, contacts the French police, and says that there is a woman being attacked outside of the Picard vineyard. So a police officer ends up showing up, looking into the abandoned Picard chateau, doesn't see Dr. Jurati, goes outside, says how much he hates the countryside, but he also sees the flickering of the cloaking device from the La Sirena. He goes on board the ship, he ends up finding the Borg Queen, and the Borg Queen basically takes him prisoner. She starts calling for Dr. Jurati in her mind, saying, I have a surprise for you. Obviously, Jurati knows that the Queen's going to be up to something, so she sees a shotgun hanging on over the fireplace mantle, takes that, comes on board the La Sirena and sees that the Borg Queen has taken this police officer captive. And the Borg Queen does what I expected was going to be happening, was that she wants to join with Dr. Jurati, become one. And she obviously was going to function through Jurati, get off the ship. When Jurati says that she doesn't want that to happen, the Borg Queen basically tries to manipulate her again by saying in every timeline that she sees, Jurati's basically a nothing, she's alone, has no life, basically, nobody to connect with. And so she offers to change that by the two of them joining minds. Well, Dr. Jurati says, no, I'm not going to do that. So the Queen says, I'm either getting out of here either with you or taking this gentleman over. And so the Queen is actually shot by Dr. Jurati, but with a shotgun in the neck. So what we find out later in the episode is that the Borg Queen says, basically, I'm always going to be a part of you. You destroyed your only way to get everybody home, and she dies. All right. At this point, we get into a whole new story with a whole new character. We got Dr. Adam Sung, obviously an ancestor of Noonien Sung and of Data, and he's talking to a board of doctors or government officials talking about the importance of genetic work and the perfection of the human genome and being able to perfect humanity. And they talk about the fact that his daughter, Corey, who happens to look like Soji, has some sort of specialized genetic defect where her blood actually turns to acid, and that the smallest speck of dust will destroy her lungs. And so she has to live in this isolated kind of lab at their house. He has been involved in some sort of genetic experiments with people, and it turns out he's actually experimenting on soldiers, and that this panel decides that his treatments and these experiments on these soldiers is unethical and illegal, so they cut his funding for the project that he's working on. So he goes home, he tests another, I guess, potential cure to try to see if it stabilizes the genetic condition of his daughter, and then he ends up getting a message on his computer screen saying, I can help. And then a whole bunch of data starts flashing on board very quickly. And then the computer monitor says, check your 3D printer. So he goes to the 3D printer and he gets this metallic card with a stylized Q on it with a phone number underneath. So Dr. Sung calls Q, they meet up in a diner, and Q says that he can offer her the cure, but he's eventually going to want something in return. So Q ends up giving Dr. Sung this little vial of blue medicine. Dr. Sung takes it home, injects it in his daughter, and they're able to let down these drones that have some sort of like UV panel, and they find out that she's actually surviving the rays of the sun, so she goes swimming in the pool, she's all happy, he's all happy, and then all of a sudden she starts falling ill. So it only lasted very briefly. So Dr. Sung has Q come to his house and basically says, if you have the cure and it obviously works, then I'm your hostage, what do you want? and Q says, do you happen to know the name Picard? And that's kind of where their story ends at that point. Going back to, the crew is now starting to reunite aboard the La Serena. We have Rios, Raffi, and 7 to 9 coming back on board the ship. They notice that Dr. Girardi is covered in blood, and that she admitted she had to kill the Borg Queen because she was going to kill this police officer. At the same time, they're dragging the police officer off the ship or to some area on board the ship, whatever. Picard and Talon come on board the ship. They all end up convening in Picard's chateau. They end up talking about, they're all updating each other on what's going on with what they've learned. They talk about this gala and how they need to make sure that Renee is protected and that she makes sure she goes into the quarantine 15 hours later. Picard or Rios are under the impression, oh, we can just transport her in there and we can crash it. But Talon says that that's not the case, that it's actually, this is a very high security function. That they're actually, the people that are attending are actually going to be stuck with transmitters, radio frequency transmitters, that they're going to have to show special forms of ID, and then once they actually get admitted into the gala, they are actually going to be watched with facial recognition software throughout the entire thing. So Dr. Girardi says that she took some sort of basic elementary antique computing class at some point, and she would be able to hack into the system to get herself in. What she actually ends up doing, she gets her way in, she sits down and she starts talking to herself when she's actually talking to the crew. But the security guards immediately see her talking to herself, so they feel that she's a party crasher. They bring her back to the surveillance room, and we find out that it was actually part of the plan. Girardi's actually in communication with all of them, and they were able to get her into the area she needed to be in to get everybody else in. At this time, she ends up seeing a vision of the Borg Queen in her mind, and so there's basically an echo of the Queen with her. They have a couple quick words, and then the episode ends. So that's pretty much where we're at right now. So I'm going to be honest with you, there was nothing about this episode that I disliked. I actually was really engrossed in this episode and enjoyed it from beginning to end. So let me talk about some of the things that I really liked. One of the biggest thing that I really enjoyed in the episode was the discussion with Picard and Talon regarding mental health. And Picard talking about how depression and anxiety in a human can really stunt somebody's growth and their creativity. And this hit me very, very hard because, as I've said in previous episodes, not only am I a therapist, a licensed clinical social worker, but I came into this field because a social worker helped me through my OCD diagnosis, which I got when I was 16, and I'm 41 now. And one thing I've learned from working in different mental health facilities with many ages over the years is that basically mental illness and its related symptoms will rob somebody of their intelligence and their creativity in many ways. I've seen a lot of people with severe mental illness who would act in what people would see as bizarre kind of ways, but when they got the treatment, we actually started to see that they were very intelligent. I worked with somebody once who was a chemical engineer, but you wouldn't have thought of that when he was going through the severity of his mental health symptoms, but when he was treated, the real him got to come out. And I've seen that with a lot of people, that a lot of people with mental illness tend to be very, very intelligent, but it's masked by the symptoms of their mental health, which affects their behaviors. And it's really, really sad, and it's something that I always try to tell people in therapy, whether they're young kids, adolescents, or adults of all ages, that they don't have to be victims of their illnesses. They might have to learn, they're going to have to learn how to incorporate it into their lives like I had to. I have to go every day throughout my life, you know, one day at a time, getting through my OCD, but it's under control through medication regimen and the therapy that I've had in the past. And I've been able to function as a normal member of society and help other people. And quite frankly, I love that because me being in the mental health field helps me give a big middle finger to the mental health diagnosis. So it's part of the reason why I love what I do and I have a genuine passion for it. So that part of the episode really hit with me. And they even described Renee for a mind that can burn so brightly, basically to be impacted by the fear. And that's kind of what Q was doing. Q was using her fear against her to try to get her away from the Europa mission. What we find out, by the way, as a side note, is when she's supposed to go on this Europa mission, she ends up finding some sort of microorganism on Io that she wants to bring back to Earth because she thinks there could be some sort of sentience to it. So we'll probably be seeing more of that as the rest of the season goes on, how that plays in. One of the other things that I really liked about the episode was the connection to Assignment Earth when Picard and Talon were coming out of the closet area where she had her transporter hidden. There was a vault door there, a metal door with a spinning kind of handle. Looked almost exactly like the one that we saw with Gary Seven's little closet transporter in Assignment Earth. So that was a nice little detail to attention. Unfortunately, I didn't see any specialized computer in her her apartment like Gary Seven had. Maybe we'll see that as the season unfolds. I don't know, but that would be really cool to see that little tie-in as well. But to have the door there, top notch. That was excellent. I also, again, really enjoyed the interaction between Raffi and Seven, and it shows the emotional bond that they have, whether they're lovers or they're friends. Regardless, they know each other very, very well. 7 and 9 was able to see how Raffi is hurting from Elnor's death and the lack of relationship that she has with her son at this point. His name's Gabe. And how she's looking for a fight and she wants to dig her heels in and she just wants to lash out and vent it out that way with the Rio situation. But Raffi's also able to see that 7 and 9 is playing it the cool, intelligent way, practical way, where she's not trying to be dangerous and she's trying to focus on the time and timeline, which Raffi at this moment doesn't care about. I loved how 7 and 9 was able to connect with Raffi by just kind of settling herself down, not challenging her, but saying, "Give me the tricorder." And she said it in a very soft, sweet voice. And Raffi realized at that moment, my goodness, she's right, and handed over the tricorder. Just a wonderful interaction between these two ladies. Again, regardless of what their relationship is, they just got a great connection to each other, and they know each other very well. I was also impressed with the interesting tricks with the new tricorders. I loved how they were able to use it to send out an electromagnetic pulse to shut down the ice bus, and how they are also able to use it as some sort of wave to knock out the ice bus driver. So something we've never really seen with a tricorder before, so that was really cool. I also really enjoyed the Dr. Sung arc. I love that Corey, his daughter, looks like Soji. A nice tie-in to Season 1, and kind of makes a sense of how Data was able to paint a picture of Soji and Daj and call it daughter in the painting in Season 1. So that made sense to me. It was also a nice tie-in for Dr. Adam Sung to be a geneticist looking into the genetic perfection of humanity going forward, because that's what, in the 22nd century, in that 3-part augment arc in Enterprise's 4th season, Dr. Eric Sung was doing the same thing, where he took some of the embryos from Cold Station 12 and had them grown and develop over a number of years, and how he came to love the augments, and how he wanted to go back to Cold Station 12 later in that arc and get the rest of the embryos so that they could be brought to life. Excellent connection. It was also nice to see Leah Thompson actually have a physical role in the Star Trek universe now. Instead of just being behind the camera, now she's actually officially a part of the Star Trek lore, which was really awesome. I love Leah Thompson. I've loved her ever since the Back to the Future movies, so it's great to see her in another sci-fi franchise. The cue card that was printed in a 3D printer was really neat. I love that it was metallic. I love the stylized cue on it, but also that phone number. So I didn't actually try it. My first thought was, I'm going to call it and see what happens. But then I realized, you know what? Every other Trekkie that watches this episode is going to do the exact same thing. And I didn't call the number yet. I still might. I haven't decided yet. But from what I had heard on the internet, that if you did call it, there was a brief message, whether it was from Q or a Starfleet message or some kind of Star Trek message in general. So if that's the case, kudos to CBS and Paramount for being able to do that and having that little treat for the Star Trek fans. The cop seeing the Queen on board the La Sirena, that actually scared me when I saw it. They lit that and choreographed that to perfection when they showed the lights on her face, and then they had her looking at almost like a crucified style with her legs gone, and him falling back, and the music that came on with it. It actually shocked me. It really, it sent a chill down my spine, which the Borg Queen has never done for me before. I know from First Contact and her appearances on Voyager, the Borg Queen was always supposed to be kind of this creepy, sexual kind of creature, being who was supposed to be scary. but I never felt scared watching the Borg Queen in any of the past episodes or movies. So seeing her in that moment, the way they handled that situation was beautifully done. It gave me an emotional reaction, and when you get an emotional reaction, you know that somebody did something right. So I thought it was wonderful. Also, I really enjoyed the fact that the Queen finally asked Jurati to join her, for them to basically merge and become one. I figured that that was going to be something that was going to happen. I think the rest of the fans knew that as well. Obviously, Jurati's fighting that, even though she's trying to make it with the Borg Queen that she doesn't want that. You know she's fighting it. You can see it in Jurati's facial features. All right. So some questions that were left from watching this episode. So this is kind of a sideline, and maybe it won't be followed up on, but they spent 2 episodes with Rios with the whole ice situation, and what looked like to be a budding attraction or relationship with that doctor, and vice versa. So are they going to follow up on that, or is that just going to be dropped at this point because the story has to move forward at this point? I don't care either way. I was just kind of wondering if something will happen with that. With the Borg Queen now dead, how are they going to return to the 25th century? Well, after this is all resolved, will Q send them back? Will they find a different way to get back? Who knows? Right now, that's going to be a big question mark. Will the Queen even actually maybe work through Jurati? Will Jurati have to get hooked up to the La Sirena and send them home? Wouldn't that be an interesting twist? You know, so that we'll see how that goes. Also, it's looking like that Q is going to want Song to do something to Renee. Take her out, poison her, something, to stop her from going on that flight. So my question is, at this point, how's that going to be played out? It'll be interesting to see. So really, those are my only... That's my review of Episode 5 of Season 2 of Star Trek Picard, Fly Me to the Moon. I'd love to hear what your thoughts were about the episode, whether this episode that I'm filming or just the actual episode of the show. Please feel free to put your comments down below. I'd love to see. I'll get back to you with your comments. If you can follow the show on YouTube, just go to youtube.com, type in Pittsburgh's Trek Chat in the search engine. It'll take you directly to my channel. You can follow the show on Facebook, facebook.com/Pittsburgh's Trek Chat. You can also follow the show on Twitter at PGH Trek Chat. I look forward to the next episode. Until then, may yins live long and prosper.